"Daddy, I'm sorry, I'm so cold." These were the last words of an 8-year-old boy, trembling on a freezing garage floor, his breath visible in the icy air. His cries for help were met not with comfort, but with cruelty. What followed was a series of events so harrowing, so inhumane, that it would leave an entire community shattered. Before we dive into the details of this case, and others like it, please be warned. The stories we're about to share are deeply disturbing. They expose the darkest corners of humanity, where those sworn to protect and serve instead became the very monsters they were meant to shield us from. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. To our new viewers, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Please take a moment to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And to our incredible community of subscribers, your likes, shares, and comments have not only helped this channel grow, but have also played a vital role in spreading awareness about these cases. We are deeply grateful for your support. Case 1.
Cuts deserve a new trial. The former Canton police officer was convicted of killing his pregnant girlfriend Jessie Davis and their unborn child back in 2008.
Bobby Lee Cutts Jr. Bobby Lee Cutts Jr. was born on May 21, 1977, in Canton, Ohio. Raised in a working-class family, Cutts was known for his athleticism and charm. He attended Glen Oak High School, where he excelled in sports and was well-liked by his peers. After high school, Cutts pursued a career in law enforcement, joining the Canton Police Department. By all accounts, he appeared to be a dedicated officer and a family man. However, beneath the surface, there were troubling signs. Cutts was married, but estranged from his wife, and he had a history of tumultuous relationships. He fathered multiple children with different women, including Jessie Davis, a 26-year-old woman who was 9 months pregnant with their second child at the time of her disappearance. Friends and family later described Cutts as controlling and manipulative, traits that would play a significant role in the events that unfolded. On June 14, 2007, Jessie Davis was last seen alive. She had spent the day shopping and preparing for the arrival of her baby girl, whom she planned to name Chloe. The next day, Jessie's mother, Patricia Porter, went to her daughter's home after failing to reach her. What she found was deeply unsettling. Jessie's 2-year-old son Blake was home alone wearing a soiled diaper. The house was in disarray, with bleach spilled on the floor and furniture overturned. Blake's words sent chills down Patricia's spine. "Mommy broke the table, and Mommy's in the rug." Jessie was nowhere to be found. The community rallied to search for Jessie, with thousands of volunteers combing the area. The case quickly gained national attention, and the pressure mounted on Bobby Cutts Jr., who was the father of Jessie's unborn child. Initially, Cutts denied any involvement in Jessie's disappearance. He appeared distraught in interviews, even shedding tears as he pleaded for her safe return. However, investigators were skeptical. 9 days after Jessie went missing, Cutts led authorities to her body, which was found in a wooded area in Summit County, Ohio. Jessie's body was wrapped in a comforter, and her unborn child had also perished. Cutts claimed that Jessie's death was an accident. He testified that during an argument, he had struck her in the throat with his elbow, causing her to collapse. Panicked, he said he tried to resuscitate her, but ultimately decided to hide her body. The trial began on February 4, 2008, and the prosecution painted a damning picture of Cutts. They argued that he had killed Jessie to avoid the financial burden of another child and to maintain his image as a police officer. The jury found Cutts guilty of the murder of Jessie Davis and the aggravated murder of her unborn child. He was also convicted of related charges, including aggravated burglary and child endangerment. On February 27, 2008, Cutts was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 57 years. The judge emphasized the betrayal of trust inherent in Cutts's role as a police officer. The case of Bobby Lee Cutts Jr. left a lasting impact on the community and the nation. Jessie Davis's family was devastated, but they found solace in the support of their community and the justice system. Jessie's son, Blake, was raised by his grandmother, Patricia Porter, who described the emotional toll of explaining his mother's death to him. The Canton Police Department faced scrutiny for their handling of the case and the behavior of one of their own. The case also sparked conversations about domestic violence and the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships. As of 2025, Bobby Lee Cutts Jr. remains incarcerated, serving his sentence in an Ohio state prison. He will not be eligible for parole until he is 87 years old. Case 2.
A former police officer who is a convicted rapist will not have his case retried.
An appeals court has upheld the sentence for former Oklahoma City Officer Daniel Holtzclaw. He's in prison for the rest of his life for sexually assaulting and raping women while on duty.
Daniel Holtzclaw. Daniel Ken Holtzclaw was born on December 10, 1986 in Guam to a Japanese mother and a white American father. His father, Eric Holtzclaw, was a lieutenant in the Enid, Oklahoma Police Department, and Daniel seemed destined to follow in his footsteps. Holtzclaw grew up in Enid, Oklahoma, where he excelled in sports, particularly football. He set a school record for tackles in a single game and went on to play as a linebacker at Eastern Michigan University, where he earned a degree in criminal justice. After failing to make it into the NFL, he joined the Oklahoma City Police Department in 2010. On the surface, Holtzclaw appeared to be a model officer, dedicated, disciplined, and ambitious. But beneath the surface, there were troubling signs. Colleagues described him as overly aggressive and arrogant, traits that would later play a role in his downfall. The case that led to Holtzclaw's arrest began in the early hours of June 18, 2014. Holtzclaw had just finished his shift and was driving home in his patrol car when he pulled over Jovanny Ligons, a woman with no criminal record. According to Ligons, Holtzclaw forced her to perform oral sex on him after making her lift her shirt and pull down her pants. She begged him to stop, fearing for her life. Unlike many of his other victims, Ligons reported the assault immediately, setting off an investigation that would uncover a horrifying pattern of abuse. Holtzclaw's crimes were not isolated incidents. Over a 6-month period, he targeted at least 13 women, all of whom were African American and from low-income neighborhoods. He used his position as a police officer to intimidate and coerce his victims, often running background checks to find women with criminal records or outstanding warrants. The investigation into Holtzclaw's actions began with Ligons' report. Detectives Kim Davis and Rocky Gregory quickly identified a pattern, linking Holtzclaw to other reports of sexual assault. Using GPS data from his patrol car and records of his traffic stops, they were able to identify additional victims. Holtzclaw was arrested on August 21, 2014, and charged with 36 counts of sexual assault, including rape, sexual battery, and forcible oral sodomy. During his interrogation, he denied all allegations and cooperated fully, even providing DNA samples. However, DNA evidence found on his uniform pants matched one of his victims, a 17-year-old girl. The trial began on November 2, 2015 and lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented testimony from 13 women, detailing how Holtzclaw had used his authority to exploit them. The defense attempted to discredit the victims, focusing on their criminal histories and lifestyles. On December 10, 2015, Holtzclaw was convicted on 18 of the 36 charges. The jury recommended a sentence of 263 years in prison, which the judge upheld. Holtzclaw was sent to a high-security prison under an alias for his own safety. The case of Daniel Holtzclaw sent shockwaves through Oklahoma City and the nation. It highlighted systemic issues within law enforcement, including the abuse of power and the targeting of marginalized communities. The trial received relatively little media attention compared to other high-profile cases, but local activists and organizations like OKC Artists for Justice worked tirelessly to bring awareness to the victims' stories. As of 2025, Holtzclaw remains incarcerated, serving his 263-year sentence. His appeals have been denied, and he continues to maintain his innocence. For the victims, the conviction brought some measure of justice, but the scars of his actions remain. Case 3.
There is breaking news in Fulton County tonight where the fate of 2 former East Point police officers charged with murder has been decided.
Yeah, the jury has just returned a verdict in the trial of Howard Weems and Marcus Eberhardt.
Howard Williams. Howard Williams, known for his dedication to law enforcement, grew up in a modest neighborhood in Georgia. From a young age, he was drawn to the idea of serving and protecting his community. His family, supportive yet strict, instilled in him a strong sense of duty and responsibility. Williams joined the East Point Police Department, where he quickly rose through the ranks due to his commitment and work ethic. However, beneath his professional demeanor, colleagues noted a tendency towards impatience and a rigid adherence to protocol, traits that would later play a crucial role in his downfall. Despite his achievements, Williams struggled with the pressures of the job, often finding himself at odds with the unpredictable nature of police work. This internal conflict, coupled with the high-stress environment, set the stage for a tragic turn of events. On April 11, 2014, Howard Williams, alongside his partner Marcus Eberhardt, responded to a domestic disturbance call involving Gregory Towns Jr. The situation escalated when Towns, a large man standing over 6 feet tall, fled into a wooded area to evade arrest. Williams and Eberhardt pursued Towns, who was eventually apprehended and handcuffed. Exhausted and out of breath, Towns repeatedly stated he was too tired to walk. Frustrated by his non-compliance, Williams and Eberhardt resorted to using their tasers to force him to move. The repeated use of the taser, despite Towns being handcuffed and subdued, proved fatal. By the time paramedics arrived, Towns was unresponsive, and he was later pronounced dead at the hospital. The incident, captured in part by witnesses, quickly drew public outrage and media attention. The death of Gregory Towns Jr. prompted an immediate investigation into the actions of Howard Williams and Marcus Eberhardt. The use of excessive force, particularly on a restrained individual, became the focal point of the inquiry. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Williams and Eberhardt had violated police protocols by using tasers on a handcuffed suspect without just cause. The defense claimed the officers acted within their rights, citing Towns' initial resistance and the need to ensure compliance. Williams, who showed little emotion during the proceedings, maintained that his actions were justified. However, the jury was unconvinced, finding him guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Eberhardt faced a more severe charge of felony murder and received a life sentence. The trial highlighted systemic issues within the police department, including inadequate training and oversight regarding the use of force. The verdict was seen as a rare instance of accountability in cases involving police misconduct. The conviction of Howard Williams and Marcus Eberhardt sent shockwaves through the community, sparking debates about police practices and the use of force. Activists and community leaders called for reforms, demanding greater transparency and accountability from law enforcement agencies. Williams, now serving his sentence, has largely remained out of the public eye. His case continues to be a point of reference in discussions about police conduct and the need for comprehensive training programs. The family of Gregory Towns Jr. has been vocal in their pursuit of justice, using their platform to advocate for change and prevent similar tragedies. The case remains a somber reminder of the consequences of unchecked authority and the importance of safeguarding human rights. Case 4. Marcus Eberhardt. Marcus LeCarl Eberhardt was a former sergeant with the East Point Police Department in Georgia. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood, Eberhardt's early life was marked by discipline and a strong sense of duty. He joined the police force in 2001, quickly rising through the ranks due to his dedication and adherence to protocol. Eberhardt was known among his peers as a by-the-book officer, someone who rarely questioned authority and expected the same from those under his command. However, his career was not without controversy. Over the years, he faced multiple complaints regarding excessive use of force, though none resulted in significant disciplinary action. By 2014, Eberhardt had been with the department for over a decade. He was well-versed in the use of non-lethal weapons, including tasers, and had undergone annual training on the department's use of force policies. Despite this, his actions on April 11, 2014, would reveal a troubling disregard for those very guidelines. On April 11, 2014, Gregory Towns Jr., a 24-year-old man, found himself at the center of a domestic dispute. His girlfriend called 911, reporting that Towns had assaulted her. When officers arrived at the scene, Towns fled on foot, leading them on a chase through a wooded area. Towns, who was over 6 feet tall and weighed 281 pounds, was eventually apprehended. Exhausted and out of breath, he complied with the officer's commands to lie face down and be handcuffed. From that moment on, he posed no threat. Eberhardt, acting as a supervisor that day, arrived at the scene shortly after Towns was detained. Despite Towns repeatedly stating that he was too tired to walk, Eberhardt ordered him to stand and move toward the patrol car. When Towns collapsed, Eberhardt instructed another officer, Howard Weems, to use a taser to force compliance. Over the next several minutes, Towns was tased multiple times in drive-stun mode, a method designed to cause intense pain without incapacitating the target. Each time he fell, the officers shocked him again, demanding that he get up. Witnesses later described the scene as harrowing, with Towns begging for a moment to rest and stating, "I can't get up. I'm tired." By the time paramedics arrived, Towns was unresponsive. He was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. An autopsy revealed that he had suffered cardiac arrest, with the repeated use of the taser listed as a contributing factor. The death of Gregory Towns Jr. sparked outrage in the community, leading to an internal investigation by the East Point Police Department. The use of force policy explicitly prohibited the use of tasers on handcuffed individuals unless there were exigent circumstances. In this case, none existed. Eberhardt and Weems were both charged with felony murder, aggravated assault, and violation of their oaths of office. During the trial, prosecutors argued that the officers had acted with reckless disregard for Towns' life, using excessive force on a man who was clearly incapacitated. The defense claimed that the officers had followed protocol and that Towns' death was an unfortunate accident. They pointed to his size and physical condition, suggesting that his health issues rather than the tasers were the primary cause of his death. However, expert medical testimony refuted this claim, stating that the repeated electrical shocks had directly contributed to Towns' cardiac arrest. The jury was shown body camera footage and heard testimony from witnesses, including neighbors who had seen the incident unfold. In December 2016, Marcus Eberhardt was convicted of felony murder and sentenced to life in prison. Howard Weems, who had followed Eberhardt's orders, received a lesser sentence of 5 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. The death of Gregory Towns Jr. and the subsequent convictions of Eberhardt and Weems sent shockwaves through the East Point community. Protests erupted, with activists calling for greater accountability and transparency in law enforcement. The case highlighted the dangers of excessive force and the misuse of non-lethal weapons like tasers. It also raised questions about the culture within police departments, where following orders is often prioritized over ethical decision-making. Eberhardt, now serving a life sentence, has maintained his innocence, claiming that he was simply doing his job. However, his actions that day have left a lasting stain on his career and a legacy of pain for Towns's family. For the Towns family, the loss of Gregory was devastating. They have since become advocates for police reform, working to ensure that no other family has to endure the same tragedy. Case 5. Matthew Kinne. Matthew Kinne was a seasoned police officer with the Madison Police Department in Wisconsin. Known for his professionalism, Kinne had served in law enforcement for over a decade. However, his career was not without controversy. In 2007, Kinne was involved in another fatal shooting, where he killed a man holding a pellet gun. The incident was ruled a suicide by cop, and Kinne was commended for his actions. Tony Robinson, the victim in this case, was a 19-year-old biracial man with a bright smile and a troubled past. Raised in Madison, Wisconsin, Tony had a loving family but struggled with behavioral issues and substance abuse. In 2014, he was convicted of armed robbery after participating in a home invasion. Despite his challenges, Tony was described by friends and family as kind-hearted and full of potential. On March 6, 2015, Tony Robinson was reportedly acting erratically. Witnesses described him as yelling, jumping in front of cars, and behaving in a way that suggested he was under the influence of drugs. Concerned friends called the police, hoping to get him help. Officer Matthew Kinne responded to the call at around 6:30 p.m. The reports indicated that Tony had assaulted someone in an apartment and was a potential threat. Kinne arrived at the scene and entered the building through an open side porch door. What happened next remains a point of contention. According to Kinne, he heard a commotion upstairs and believed Tony was attacking someone. He climbed the stairs and encountered Tony at the top. Kinne claimed that Tony punched him in the head, causing a concussion. Fearing for his life and believing Tony might take his weapon, Kinne fired his gun. Tony was struck by 7 bullets at close range. He fell down the stairs where he lay motionless. Witnesses and physical evidence later contradicted some of Kinne's claims, raising questions about the necessity of the shooting. The Wisconsin Department of Justice launched an investigation into the shooting, as required by state law. Autopsy results revealed that Tony had ingested Xanax, psilocybin mushrooms, and THC, which likely contributed to his erratic behavior. Kinne's account of the events was scrutinized. Witnesses reported that Tony was unarmed and did not pose an immediate threat. Physical evidence showed that all bullet casings were found at the bottom of the stairs, suggesting that Kinne fired as Tony was falling or already on the ground. Despite these inconsistencies, Dane County District Attorney Ismael Ozan announced on May 12, 2015, that Kinne would not face criminal charges. The shooting was deemed a lawful use of deadly police force. The decision sparked outrage. Tony's family and community members accused the justice system of protecting law enforcement at the expense of accountability. Protests erupted across Madison, with demonstrators chanting Black Lives Matter and demanding justice for Tony. In 2017, Tony's mother, Andrea Irwin, accepted a $335 million settlement from the city to resolve a civil rights lawsuit. While the settlement provided some financial relief, it did little to ease the pain of losing her son. The death of Tony Robinson became a flashpoint in the national conversation about police violence and racial injustice. His name was added to the growing list of unarmed black men killed by law enforcement, fueling the Black Lives Matter movement. For Officer Matthew Kinne, the shooting marked the second fatal incident of his career. While he was cleared of criminal wrongdoing, the case left a lasting stain on his reputation. Critics questioned whether someone with a history of using lethal force should remain in law enforcement. The community of Madison was left grappling with the aftermath of the tragedy. Protests and vigils highlighted the deep divisions between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Tony's family continues to advocate for police reform, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Case 6.
Sentenced a former LAPD officer to 40 years to life.
Henry Solis. Henry Solis was born in 1987 and grew up in Lancaster, California. Raised in a working-class family, Solis was described as disciplined and ambitious. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps after high school, serving a tour in Iraq in 2007. His military service earned him several medals, including recognition for his marksmanship and conduct. After leaving the Marines, Solis pursued a career in law enforcement, a path that seemed to align with his disciplined background. In 2014, he achieved his dream of becoming a police officer, joining the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD. Assigned to the Devonshire Division in the San Fernando Valley, Solis was still in training when his life took a dark turn. Despite his outward success, there were signs of instability. Friends and colleagues noted his temper and a tendency to take things personally. These traits, combined with his military training, would later play a role in the tragic events that unfolded. The date was March 13, 2015. Solis, off duty at the time, was at a bar in downtown Pomona. Witnesses later described him as agitated and confrontational. That night, he crossed paths with 23-year-old Salome Rodriguez Jr., a young man out enjoying the evening. An argument broke out between the two men inside the bar. The exact cause of the dispute remains unclear, but it quickly escalated. Solis, fueled by anger, followed Rodriguez outside. Surveillance footage captured the two men in a heated exchange before Solis chased Rodriguez down the street. Moments later, gunshots rang out. Solis shot Rodriguez multiple times, leaving him fatally wounded. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with people fleeing in panic. Solis, instead of staying to render aid or explain his actions, fled the scene. The investigation began immediately. Pomona police found Solis's car abandoned near the crime scene, a critical piece of evidence that linked him to the shooting. When Solis failed to report for duty the next day, the LAPD launched an internal inquiry. Solis's actions after the shooting raised even more red flags. He called his father, Victor Solis, and the two drove to El Paso, Texas. Surveillance footage later revealed the pair crossing the U.S.-Mexico border on foot. Solis had become a fugitive. For 2 months, Solis evaded capture, hiding with relatives in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. The FBI and U.S. Marshals launched a manhunt, working with Mexican authorities to track him down. On May 26, 2015, Solis was arrested in Juarez and extradited to the United States. During his trial, Solis's defense argued that the shooting was an act of self-defense, claiming that Rodriguez had provoked the altercation. However, prosecutors presented damning evidence, including surveillance footage and witness testimonies, that painted a different picture. On February 5, 2020, a jury convicted Solis of second-degree murder. The court also found that he had personally discharged a firearm during the crime. On March 11, 2020, Solis was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. The case of Henry Solis sent shockwaves through the LAPD and the community. As a rookie officer, Solis represented the promise of a new generation of law enforcement. His actions, however, became a symbol of betrayal and abuse of power. The family of Salome Rodriguez Jr. expressed both relief and sorrow at the verdict. While justice had been served, no sentence could bring back their son. Rodriguez's mother, Lydia, described the pain of losing her child and the betrayal of knowing his killer was someone sworn to protect the public. The LAPD faced intense scrutiny following the case. Questions were raised about their vetting and training processes, particularly for officers with military backgrounds. The department pledged to review its policies to prevent similar incidents in the future. As of 2025, Solis remains incarcerated, serving his sentence in a California state prison. His father, Victor, was convicted of aiding his escape and sentenced to 3 years probation. Case 7.
Yeah, inconsistencies. In fact, investigators have said blatantly that Numan Raja lied to them as he was giving this statement. The shooting happened right here, right near the off-ramp of I-95 onto PGA Boulevard. And you can see this memorial has been sitting here almost since the day of the shooting. It's about 2.5 years. October of 2015. And this is the first time we're hearing from Numan Raja, his own words, his own version of what happened. Let me go ahead and show you some of that video right now because we just obtained a copy of Raja's interview with police. Raja, at the time of the shooting, was dressed in plain clothes and he was driving an unmarked white van. He says he saw what he thought was an empty vehicle parked.
Numan Raja was born in Pakistan and later immigrated to the United States, becoming a naturalized citizen in 2001. His grandfather had served as a police chief in Pakistan, and Raja seemed to follow in his footsteps, pursuing a career in law enforcement. Raja worked for several small police departments in Florida before joining the Palm Beach Gardens Police Department in 2015. Known for his ambition, he was also described as aggressive and overzealous, traits that would later come under scrutiny. At the time of the incident, Raja was working as a plainclothes officer conducting burglary surveillance. His career, however, was on shaky ground, as he was still within his 6-month probationary period with the department. On October 18, 2015, Corey Jones, a 31-year-old musician and housing inspector, was driving home from a late-night performance with his band, Future Presidents. His SUV broke down on the southbound exit ramp of Interstate 95 in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Jones called for roadside assistance and waited by his vehicle. He had also recently purchased a legally owned .380 caliber handgun for self-defense, which he carried with him that night. Numan Raja, dressed in plain clothes and driving an unmarked white van, approached Jones's vehicle. Raja later claimed he thought the SUV was abandoned and that he was conducting a routine check. However, audio recordings from Jones's phone call with roadside assistance revealed a different story. Raja did not identify himself as a police officer. Instead, he aggressively confronted Jones, who likely mistook him for a threat. Within seconds, Raja fired 6 shots, hitting Jones 3 times. One bullet pierced Jones's heart, killing him. Jones's gun was found nearby, unfired. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, with assistance from the FBI, launched an investigation into the shooting. Raja's initial statements to investigators claimed that he had identified himself as a police officer and fired in self-defense after Jones pointed a gun at him. However, the audio recording from Jones's phone call contradicted Raja's account. The recording revealed that Raja never identified himself as an officer and that the final shot was fired 33 seconds before Raja called 911. In June 2016, a grand jury indicted Raja on charges of manslaughter by culpable negligence and attempted first-degree murder. He was arrested, released on a $250,000 bond, and placed under house arrest. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Raja's actions were reckless and unjustified. They highlighted the audio evidence, which painted a clear picture of the events leading up to Jones's death. The defense, on the other hand, claimed that Raja acted in self-defense, citing Florida's Stand Your Ground law. On March 7, 2019, after an 8-day trial, Raja was found guilty on both charges. The jury's decision marked the first time in 30 years that a Florida police officer was convicted for an on-duty shooting. On April 25, 2019, Raja was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The judge described the case as heartbreaking and emphasized the gravity of Raja's actions. The killing of Corey Jones sent shockwaves through the community and reignited debates about police accountability and the use of force. Jones's family, represented by civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, called for justice and systemic change. In 2023, the family reached a $2 million settlement in a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Palm Beach Gardens and Raja. As of 2025, Raja remains incarcerated at the Wakulla Correctional Institution in Florida. His scheduled release date is February 27, 2044, though he may be eligible for parole in 2040. Case 8. Nicholas Tartaglione. Nicholas Tartaglione was born and raised in New York, where he grew up in a working-class family. He pursued a career in law enforcement, eventually becoming a police officer in Briarcliff Manor, a small town in Westchester County. Tartaglione was known for his physical strength and imposing presence, traits that earned him respect among his peers, but also raised concerns about his aggressive tendencies. Despite his outward appearance as a dedicated officer, Tartaglione's career was marred by controversy. He was accused of misconduct multiple times, including allegations of excessive force. These incidents hinted at a darker side, one that would later manifest in unimaginable violence. After leaving the police force, Tartaglione ventured into the world of drug trafficking. He became involved in a cocaine distribution ring, a stark departure from his days as a law enforcement officer. This shift marked the beginning of his descent into criminality, setting the stage for the horrific events of 2016. On April 11, 2016, Martin Luna, a man involved in a drug operation with Tartaglione, was lured to the Liquid Lounge, a bar owned by Tartaglione's brother in Chester, New York. Luna had reportedly stolen $250,000 from Tartaglione, and the former officer was determined to confront him. Unaware of the deadly trap awaiting him, Luna brought along his 2 nephews, Miguel Luna and Urbano Santiago, as well as a family friend, Hector Gutierrez. The 4 men entered the bar, where Tartaglione was waiting. What happened next was nothing short of a nightmare. Tartaglione restrained and tortured Martin Luna, demanding to know the whereabouts of the stolen money. When Luna failed to provide the information, Tartaglione strangled him to death with a zip tie. The other 3 men, who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, were forced to kneel in a remote wooded area. Tartaglione executed them with gunshots to the back of the head, their lives extinguished in an instant. The bodies of all 4 victims were buried in a shallow grave on Tartaglione's property in Otisville, a grim attempt to cover up the crime. The disappearance of the 4 men initially baffled investigators. It wasn't until December 2016, 8 months after the murders, that the FBI and local law enforcement discovered the mass grave on Tartaglione's property. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the community and marked the beginning of a complex investigation. Surveillance footage from the Liquid Lounge showed the victims entering the bar on the day of their disappearance. Additional evidence, including cell phone records and witness testimonies, linked Tartaglione to the crime. Tartaglione was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and drug conspiracy. During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a man who had betrayed his oath as a police officer and committed heinous acts of violence. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the evidence, but the overwhelming weight of the prosecution's case left little room for doubt. Tartaglione showed no remorse during the proceedings, maintaining his innocence despite the damning evidence against him. In 2023, Tartaglione was convicted on all charges. The judge described him as a monster and sentenced him to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The sentence reflected the gravity of his crimes and the pain inflicted on the victims' families. The case of Nicholas Tartaglione sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community and the public at large. It highlighted the devastating consequences of corruption and the betrayal of public trust. For the families of the victims, the conviction brought some measure of closure, but the scars of their loss remain. The community of Chester, New York, continues to grapple with the horror of the events that unfolded in their midst. As of 2025, Tartaglione remains incarcerated, serving his life sentences in a federal prison. His appeals have been denied, and he is unlikely to ever see the outside world again. Case 9.
Former Balch Springs police officer accused of murder took the stand this morning in his own defense. Fox 4's Sean Rabb has been following the trial of Roy Oliver.
Roy Oliver was born and raised in Texas. He joined the Balch Springs Police Department in 2011, where he served for 6 years before the events that would change his life, and the lives of many others, forever. Oliver's career as a police officer was marked by a history of complaints and disciplinary actions. In one instance, he was suspended for anger management issues after an altercation with a motorist. Despite these red flags, he continued to serve in law enforcement, a role that would ultimately place him at the center of a national tragedy. On the night of April 29, 2017, officers including Roy Oliver responded to a 911 call reporting underage drinking at a house party. The scene was chaotic, with partygoers fleeing after hearing what they believed to be gunshots. Jordan Edwards, a 15-year-old high school freshman, was among the teenagers at the party. He and his friends decided to leave, hoping to avoid any trouble. Jordan's 16-year-old brother was driving the car, with Jordan sitting in the front passenger seat. As the car began to drive away, Oliver fired 3 rifle rounds into the vehicle, striking Jordan in the back of the head. The car was moving away from the officers, not toward them, as initially claimed by Oliver. Body camera footage later revealed that Oliver's account of the events was false. Jordan Edwards was pronounced dead at a local hospital. His death sent shockwaves through the community and the nation, sparking outrage and calls for justice. The investigation into Jordan's death revealed a series of troubling details. Body camera footage contradicted Oliver's claim that the car was moving aggressively toward the officers. Instead, it showed the vehicle driving away, posing no threat. Oliver was fired from the Balch Springs Police Department on May 2, 2017, just days after the shooting. On May 5th, he was charged with murder and arrested. He posted a $300,000 bond and was released shortly after. The trial began in August 2018, and the evidence against Oliver was overwhelming. Prosecutors argued that his actions were reckless and unjustified, while the defense claimed he acted out of fear for his partner's safety. After 15 hours of deliberation, the jury found Oliver guilty of murder. The following day, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Prosecutors had sought a minimum sentence of 60 years, but the jury opted for a shorter term. Jordan Edwards' death became a symbol of the ongoing struggle for police accountability and justice for victims of police violence. His family, devastated by the loss, described him as a bright, kind-hearted teenager who loved football and had dreams of making a difference in the world. The case sparked widespread outrage and protests, with many calling for systemic changes in law enforcement. The hashtag #JordanEdwards trended on social media, amplifying the call for justice. As of 2025, Roy Oliver remains incarcerated, serving his 15-year sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2026. Case 10.
Aaron Dean is now in custody again as he awaits his punishment phase of his trial. Hello, I'm Steve Eager.
Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes. The former Fort Worth police officer was convicted of manslaughter after 2 days of jury deliberations.
Aaron Dean. Aaron Dean was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. He grew up in a middle-class family where discipline and hard work were emphasized. Dean was described as quiet and reserved, with a strong interest in law enforcement from a young age. After graduating from high school, Dean pursued a degree in physics at the University of Texas at Arlington, but later shifted his focus to law enforcement. He joined the Fort Worth Police Department in 2017, fulfilling a lifelong dream. Dean's colleagues described him as diligent but inexperienced. He had a reputation for being overly cautious, a trait that some saw as a lack of confidence. Despite this, he was determined to prove himself in the field. However, his short tenure with the department would be overshadowed by a single devastating decision. On October 12, 2019, Aaron Dean was dispatched to a home in Fort Worth for a welfare check. A concerned neighbor had called a non-emergency line, reporting that the front door of a Tatiana Jefferson's home was open late at night. A Tatiana Jefferson, a 28-year-old black woman, was inside the house playing video games with her 8-year-old nephew, Zion Carr. Earlier that evening, they had accidentally burned hamburgers, prompting them to open the doors to air out the smoke. Dean and his partner, Officer Carol Darch, arrived at the scene around 2:25 a.m. Instead of announcing their presence, they quietly approached the house, believing it might be a burglary in progress. Dean moved to the backyard, shining his flashlight through a window. Inside, Jefferson heard noises and retrieved her handgun, likely fearing an intruder. As she approached the window, Dean saw her silhouette. Without identifying himself as a police officer, he shouted, "Put your hands up, show me your hands," and fired a single shot through the glass. Jefferson collapsed to the floor, mortally wounded. Zion, who witnessed the shooting, later testified that his aunt had been trying to protect him, thinking there was a prowler outside. The shooting of a Tatiana Jefferson sparked immediate outrage, both locally and nationally. Critics condemned Dean's actions as reckless and emblematic of systemic issues within law enforcement. Dean resigned from the Fort Worth Police Department 2 days after the incident and was arrested shortly thereafter. He was charged with murder, a rare move in cases involving police officers. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Dean had acted negligently, failing to follow basic police protocols. They highlighted his decision not to announce his presence and his failure to render aid after the shooting. Dean took the stand in his own defense, claiming he had fired in self-defense after seeing a gun pointed at him. However, under cross-examination, he admitted to multiple instances of bad police work, including not informing his partner about the gun and not fully assessing the situation before firing. The jury deliberated for over 13 hours before convicting Dean of manslaughter, a lesser charge than murder. On December 16, 2022, he was sentenced to 11 years, 10 months, and 12 days in prison. The death of Tatiana Jefferson and the subsequent trial of Aaron Dean had a profound impact on the Fort Worth community and beyond. Protests erupted, with activists demanding justice for Jefferson and broader reforms in policing. Jefferson's family expressed mixed emotions about the verdict, grateful for the conviction, but disappointed that Dean was not found guilty of murder. Her death became a rallying cry for accountability and change, often mentioned alongside other high-profile cases like those of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Dean's conviction marked a rare instance of a police officer being held criminally responsible for an on-duty shooting. However, the case also underscored the challenges of prosecuting law enforcement officers, particularly when issues of race and systemic bias are involved. As of 2024, Dean remains incarcerated, with his legal team pursuing appeals. Meanwhile, Jefferson's family continues to honor her memory, advocating for justice and systemic change. Case 11.
Chief murdered in an alleged alcohol-fueled brawl inside a Florida hotel room. His own officer accused of the crime.
Michael Nye. Michael Patrick Nye, a seasoned detective from Manford, Oklahoma, was known for his dedication to law enforcement. Born and raised in a small town, Nye grew up in a close-knit community where respect for authority and hard work were deeply ingrained values. Nye's career in law enforcement spanned decades, during which he earned a reputation as a reliable and diligent officer. However, those who knew him personally described a man who struggled with the pressures of the job. The weight of his responsibilities, coupled with the emotional toll of police work, often left him battling stress and seeking solace in alcohol. Despite his professional accomplishments, Nye's personal life was marked by challenges. Friends and colleagues noted his tendency to internalize his struggles, a trait that would later play a pivotal role in the events that unfolded. On November 10, 2019, Michael Nye and his boss, Manford Police Chief Lucky Miller, traveled to Pensacola Beach, Florida, to attend a law enforcement conference on death investigations. The trip was meant to be a professional development opportunity, but it quickly took a dark turn. The two men checked into room 527 at the Hilton Pensacola Beach Hotel. That evening, they began drinking heavily while watching a football game. Witnesses later described hearing loud noises and what sounded like a heated argument coming from their room. As the night progressed, the situation escalated. Hotel guests reported hearing thuds, shouting, and what one witness described as animalistic noises. Security was eventually called to the room after multiple noise complaints. When a security guard entered room 527, he found Nye sitting on top of Miller, who was unconscious and unresponsive. The two men were wedged between the bed and the wall. Miller had sustained multiple blunt force injuries to his head and showed signs of strangulation. Despite efforts to revive him, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The death of Lucky Miller sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community. Nye was immediately taken into custody, and an investigation was launched by the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Nye had killed Miller in a fit of drunken rage. Forensic evidence revealed that Miller had suffered 5 blunt force injuries to his head and signs of asphyxiation. Witnesses testified about the loud and chaotic noises coming from the room, with one recalling hearing Miller plead, "Stop it, Mike." Nye's defense team painted a different picture, suggesting that the incident was a tragic accident fueled by alcohol. They argued that the two men, both heavily intoxicated, had been engaged in drunken foolishness that spiraled out of control. The defense posited that Nye may have accidentally fallen on Miller, causing his injuries. Nye chose not to testify in his own defense, leaving the jury to deliberate based on the evidence presented. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. The conviction of Michael Nye marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Manford Police Department and the families involved. Nye faced a maximum sentence of life in prison, with his sentencing hearing scheduled for April 29, 2021. The case highlighted the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions and substance abuse, particularly within high-stress professions like law enforcement. It also served as a sobering reminder of the human vulnerabilities that exist behind the badge. For the family of Lucky Miller, the loss was immeasurable. A beloved husband and father, Miller's death left a void that could never be filled. His legacy, however, lives on through the memories of those who knew and loved him. As for Nye, his once promising career in law enforcement ended in disgrace. The man who had dedicated his life to upholding the law now found himself on the other side of the justice system, a cautionary tale of how quickly life can unravel. Case 12.
Tonight, the new attorney for an NYPD cop charged in the murder of his son is calling the incident a tragic accident.
He also says Michael Valva is emotionally distraught and on suicide watch. CBS 2's Jennifer McLogan reports from Riverhead.
Michael Valva. Michael Valva was a 43-year-old NYPD transit officer, a man who had sworn to protect and serve. On the surface, he appeared to be a dedicated father of 3 boys, including Thomas and his older brother Anthony, both of whom were on the autism spectrum. But behind closed doors, the reality was far darker. After a contentious divorce, Valva gained custody of his sons in 2017. The boys moved into the Long Island home of Valva's fiancée, Angela Polina, a woman described as controlling and demanding. From the beginning, the boys were subjected to harsh punishments for their incontinence issues, a symptom of their autism. Polina reportedly despised the children, and Valva, desperate to maintain his relationship with her, allowed the abuse to escalate. Teachers and school staff noticed the signs. Thomas and Anthony often arrived at school hungry, bruised, and wearing urine-soaked clothes. They scavenged for food from the trash and ate crumbs off the floor. Despite multiple reports to Child Protective Services, the system failed to intervene. January 17, 2020, began like any other day in the Valva household, a day of cruelty and neglect. The night before, Thomas and Anthony had been forced to sleep in the garage as punishment for soiling themselves. The garage had no heat, no blankets, and no mattresses. That morning, Thomas, weak and disoriented, soiled himself again. Enraged, Valva dragged him outside and hosed him down with freezing water from a garden spigot. Surveillance footage captured the horrifying scene. Thomas collapsing repeatedly as his father screamed at him to get up. By the time Valva finally called 911, nearly an hour had passed. He claimed Thomas had fallen while running to catch the school bus, but paramedics found the boy unresponsive, with a body temperature of just 76 degrees, severe hypothermia. Despite their efforts, Thomas was pronounced dead at the hospital. The investigation quickly unraveled the truth. Surveillance footage from the home revealed the extent of the abuse. Prosecutors described the Valva Polina household as a house of horrors, where the boys were routinely beaten, starved, and forced to sleep in the freezing garage. During the trial, Valva's defense argued that Thomas's death was a tragic accident, claiming he had no intention of harming his son. They attempted to shift the blame onto Polina, portraying her as the mastermind behind the abuse. But the evidence was damning. Text messages between Valva and Polina showed their callous disregard for the boy's suffering. In one message, Polina complained about the boy's incontinence, to which Valva replied, "If only he had a bathroom." Surveillance footage captured Valva berating Thomas even as the boy lay dying, saying, "I'm suffocating him, is what I'm doing." In November 2022, after a 5-week trial, Valva was convicted of second-degree murder and 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Polina was also convicted and received the same sentence. Thomas's death sent shockwaves through the community and sparked outrage over the failures of the child welfare system. His mother, Justina Zubko Valva, fought tirelessly to bring attention to the abuse her sons endured and to hold those responsible accountable. As of April 2025, Michael Valva has served just over 2 years of his sentence. He remains incarcerated in a New York State correctional facility with his earliest parole eligibility in 2047. Case 13.
Earlier this afternoon, the Minneapolis City Council approving 2 separate use-of-force settlements, both involving former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
2 people sued, saying Chauvin pressed his knee into their necks years before killing George Floyd.
Derek Chauvin. Derek Michael Chauvin was born in 1976 in West St. Paul, Minnesota. His father was a certified public accountant, and his mother was a homemaker. When Chauvin was 7 years old, his parents divorced, sharing joint custody of him. Chauvin's early life was unremarkable, marked by a quiet demeanor and a lack of academic success. He dropped out of high school, but later earned a GED. He pursued a certificate in food preparation and worked as a cook at McDonald's and a buffet restaurant. In 1996, Chauvin joined the U.S. Army Reserve, serving as a military police officer until 2004. During this time, He also attended community college and later earned a bachelor's degree in law enforcement. In 2001, he joined the Minneapolis Police Department, where he would serve for nearly 2 decades. Chauvin's career was marred by controversy. He was involved in 3 police shootings, one of which was fatal, and had 18 complaints filed against him, though only 2 resulted in disciplinary action. Colleagues described him as rigid and by the book, but his record hinted at a troubling pattern of excessive force, particularly against people of color. On May 25, 2020, Derek Chauvin and 3 other officers responded to a call about a man allegedly using a counterfeit $20 bill at a convenience store in Minneapolis. The man was George Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American who had recently moved to the city for a fresh start. Floyd was handcuffed and placed on the ground after reportedly resisting getting into the police car. Witnesses and body camera footage later revealed that Floyd was cooperative but visibly distressed, repeatedly telling officers that he couldn't breathe. Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck, pressing his full weight into him, while Floyd lay face down, handcuffed and motionless. For 9 minutes and 29 seconds, Floyd pleaded for his life, calling out for his mother and saying, "I can't breathe." Bystanders begged Chauvin to stop, but he remained unmoved, even as Floyd lost consciousness. The scene was captured on video by a bystander, Darnella Frazier, whose footage would become a catalyst for global protests. Floyd was pronounced dead shortly after being taken to the hospital. The video of George Floyd's death sparked immediate outrage, leading to protests in Minneapolis that quickly spread across the United States and the world. The incident became a symbol of systemic racism and police brutality, fueling the Black Lives Matter movement. Derek Chauvin was arrested on May 29, 2020, and charged with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. The trial began in March 2021 and was one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in recent history. Prosecutors argued that Chauvin's actions were a gross abuse of power and a clear violation of police protocol. They presented compelling evidence, including the bystander video, body camera footage, and testimony from medical experts who confirmed that Floyd died from asphyxiation caused by Chauvin's knee. The defense claimed that Floyd's death was due to underlying health conditions and drug use, not Chauvin's actions. However, this argument was widely criticized and contradicted by the evidence. On April 20, 2021, after 10 hours of deliberation, the jury found Chauvin guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison for the state charges and later received a 21-year federal sentence for violating Floyd's civil rights. The sentences are being served concurrently, with a projected release date in 2037. The murder of George Floyd and Derek Chauvin's conviction marked a turning point in the fight against police brutality. Floyd's death led to widespread protests, policy changes, and calls for police reform. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act was introduced in Congress, aiming to increase accountability and transparency in law enforcement, though it has yet to pass into law. Chauvin's actions also brought scrutiny to his past. In 2022, he pleaded guilty to federal charges of using excessive force in a separate 2017 incident involving a 14-year-old boy. The city of Minneapolis settled multiple lawsuits related to Chauvin's misconduct, paying millions to victims. In November 2023, Chauvin was stabbed 22 times by a fellow inmate at a federal prison in Arizona. He survived the attack and was transferred to a different facility in Texas, where he continues to serve his sentence under heightened security. For George Floyd's family, the pain of his loss remains immeasurable. They have used their platform to advocate for justice and systemic change, ensuring that Floyd's legacy lives on. Case 14. Wayne Couzens. Wayne Couzens was born on December 20, 1972, in Dover, Kent, England. He grew up in a seemingly ordinary family and attended Castlemount School. After completing his GCSEs, he worked as a mechanic in his family's garage. In 2002, he enlisted in the Territorial Army, but was discharged 4 years later for failing to meet training obligations. Couzens' early life showed no overt signs of the darkness that would later define him, but cracks began to appear as he transitioned into adulthood. He struggled with personal debt and exhibited troubling behavior, including a reported incident of indecent exposure in 2015. Despite these red flags, he joined the Civil Nuclear Constabulary in 2011 as an authorized firearms officer and later transferred to the Metropolitan Police in 2018. By 2020, Couzens was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, a prestigious role that gave him access to firearms and the authority to protect government officials. However, beneath the surface, he was a man with a history of predatory behavior, including multiple allegations of indecent exposure that were either ignored or poorly investigated. On the evening of March 3, 2021, Sarah Everard left a friend's house in Clapham, South London, and began her walk home to Brixton Hill. She spoke to her boyfriend on the phone for about 15 minutes, agreeing to meet him the next day. At 9:34 p.m., she was seen on CCTV walking along Poinders Road. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Wayne Couzens was patrolling the area in a rented white Vauxhall Crossland. He stopped her, showed his police warrant card, and handcuffed her under the pretense of arresting her for breaching COVID-19 guidelines. Witnesses later reported seeing the interaction but assumed it was a legitimate police operation. Couzens drove Sarah to Kent, where he transferred her to his personal car. Over the next few hours, he raped and strangled her using his police-issued belt. By 2:34 a.m., he was seen on CCTV purchasing drinks at a petrol station, his heinous crime already complete. He then drove to a wooded area near Ashford, where he burned Sarah's body inside a refrigerator before disposing of her remains in a pond. Sarah's disappearance sparked a massive search operation. Her boyfriend reported her missing the next day, and CCTV footage quickly identified Couzens' rented vehicle. On March 9, 2021, police arrested him at his home in Deal, Kent. During questioning, Couzens initially denied any involvement, claiming he was being blackmailed by a gang of Eastern Europeans. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. CCTV footage, cell phone data, and forensic evidence all pointed to his guilt. On June 8, 2021, Couzens pleaded guilty to kidnapping and rape, and on July 9th, he admitted to Sarah's murder. During sentencing, the judge described his actions as devastating, tragic, and wholly brutal, emphasizing the abuse of his position as a police officer. On September 30, 2021, Couzens was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, meaning he will never be eligible for parole. Sarah Everard's murder sent shockwaves through the UK, sparking widespread outrage and a national conversation about women's safety and police accountability. Vigils were held across the country, including a controversial gathering at Clapham Common, where police clashed with mourners. An independent inquiry led by Lady Elish Angiolini revealed systemic failures within the police force, including missed opportunities to investigate Couzens' history of sexual misconduct. The report concluded that his crimes were not isolated incidents, but part of a pattern of predatory behavior that went unchecked for years. The stories we've shared today are a chilling reminder of the devastating consequences of corruption, abuse of power, and unchecked authority. These cases highlight the importance of accountability, justice, and the need for systemic reform to prevent such tragedies from happening again. If you found this video insightful, please consider subscribing to our channel for more in-depth true crime stories and investigations. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to shed light on these critical issues and honor the victims whose voices deserve to be heard. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What case shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if there's a story you'd like us to cover, feel free to share your suggestions. Together we can keep these conversations alive and demand the change our society so desperately needs. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember, justice begins with awareness.